Princess Lyra of the Crimson Court had never backed down from anything in her 19 years of life. Not from her father the Emperor, when he tried to marry her to the repulsive Duke of Ash. Not from the assassin sent by her stepmother, when she fought him off with a serving tray and a candlestick. Not from the dragon that had nested in the Eastern Tower, which she had politely asked to leave and, to everyone's surprise, it had. So when the stranger appeared in the throne room, unannounced and uninvited, Lyra did not scream. She did not faint. She did not call for the guards. She stood up from her father's empty throne. The emperor was away, crushing a rebellion in the northern provinces, and faced him. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And how did you get past the walls?" The stranger was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Not imposing, not monstrous, just tall. 6.5 feet, perhaps. Broad shoulders wrapped in a cloak the color of midnight. His face was hidden in shadow, but she could see the outline of a strong jaw and the faint glow of eyes that reflected the torchlight like a wolf's. "I walked," he said. His voice was low, quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes either a confession or a kill. "You walked." Lyra's hand drifted to the dagger at her belt. Past 3 concentric walls, 2 moats, a battalion of the Imperial Guard, and a magical ward woven by the most powerful sorcerers in the kingdom. "You walked." "Yes." Lyra's fingers closed around the dagger's hilt. She did not draw it. Not yet. Her father had taught her that the first rule of power was information. Never strike until you know what you are striking at. "What do you want?" The stranger tilted his head. The movement was slow, deliberate, the movement of a creature that had no fear, no urgency, no reason to rush. "I want to talk to the Emperor." "The Emperor is not here." "I know." "Then why have you come?" "Because you are here." Lyra felt a cold finger trace down her spine. She did not shiver. She did not show fear. She had learned long ago that fear was a perfume that predators could smell from miles away. "I am the princess," she said, "not the Emperor. I have no power to grant you an audience, no authority to hear your petition, no army to offer for your cause. Whatever you want, you will have to wait for my father's return." The stranger took a step forward. 1 step. His boot echoed on the marble floor like a heartbeat. "I am not here for an audience," he said, "or a petition, or an army." "Then what are you here for?" He was close enough now that she could see his hands. They were large hands, scarred and calloused, the hands of a warrior or a laborer. But they were empty. No weapon, no threat, just hands hanging at his sides, fingers curled slightly, as if he were holding something invisible. "To warn you," he said. Lyra's grip on her dagger tightened. She had heard warnings before. Every week, someone came to the Crimson Court with a prophecy, a vision, a dream, a premonition. The kingdom was going to fall. The emperor was going to die. The princess was going to be kidnapped, murdered, married to a frog, turned into a swan. The warnings were endless and almost always worthless. "Warn me of what?" she asked. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. The stranger's eyes glowed brighter. Not with anger, with something else. Something that looked, in the flickering torchlight, almost like sadness. "Of him," the stranger said. "Him who?" "The man you are about to marry." Lyra laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, not because she was amused, but because she was startled. The stranger had touched a nerve she had been trying to hide. "I am not about to marry anyone," she said. "My father's attempt to wed me to the Duke of Ash failed. He has not proposed another match." "He will," the stranger said, "soon. And the man he chooses will not be a fat old duke. He will be young, handsome, charming. He will walk into this court and smile at you, and you will think, just for a moment, that perhaps this is not so bad. Perhaps this husband could be a friend. Perhaps this marriage could be something other than a cage." Lyra's heart was beating faster now. She could feel it in her throat, in her temples, in the tips of her fingers. "And who is this man?" she whispered. The stranger was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet that she had to lean forward to hear him. "They call him the Prince of Thorns." Lyra's blood went cold. She had heard that name. Everyone in the 9 kingdoms had heard that name. The Prince of Thorns was a legend, a monster in human form, a warlord who had conquered 7 kingdoms in 5 years, a man whose armor was said to be made from the bones of his enemies, and whose crown was woven from thorns that grew from the graves of his victims. No one knew his true name. No one knew his face. Those who had seen him and lived, and there were very few, spoke only in whispers, their eyes hollow, their voices broken. "He is not real," Lyra said, but her voice wavered. "He is a story, a myth, a scarecrow that parents use to frighten their children into obedience." "He is real," the stranger said, "and he is coming. Your father has made a deal with him, your hand in marriage in exchange for an army to crush the Northern Rebellion. The deal is already signed. The messenger is already riding back with the Emperor's seal." Lyra's dagger was in her hand. She did not remember drawing it. The blade caught the torchlight and threw it back in jagged pieces. "You are lying," she said. "I am not. Prove it." The stranger reached into his cloak. Lyra tensed, ready to strike, ready to scream, ready to do anything except stand there and wait to die. But he did not pull out a weapon. He pulled out a piece of parchment, folded, creased, sealed with wax that bore the imperial crest of her father. He threw it at her feet. Lyra did not bend to pick it up. She could not. Her legs had turned to stone. Her eyes were fixed on the seal, her father's seal, the golden dragon on crimson wax, the mark that could not be forged. "You see," the stranger said, "I am not lying. I am not your enemy. I am not here to hurt you. I am here because someone must tell you the truth before it is too late." Lyra's hand lowered. The dagger point dropped toward the floor. "Why?" she asked. Her voice cracked. She hated that. "Why do you care what happens to me?" The stranger stepped back. The torchlight caught his face for just a moment, a flash of pale skin, high cheekbones, a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "Because I have seen what the Prince of Thorns does to his brides," he said, "and I could not let it happen again." Lyra did not sleep that night. She sat in her chambers, the parchment spread across her desk, her fingers tracing the words of her father's treaty. It was real. She had read it 100 times. The language was formal, cold, precise, the language of a transaction, not a marriage. Her father had sold her. For 20,000 soldiers and a pledge of loyalty, he had sold his only daughter to a monster. The Prince of Thorns would arrive in 7 days. The wedding would take place in the grand chapel of the Crimson Court. Afterward, she would be taken to his fortress, a place called the Thorn Keep, carved into the side of a mountain that overlooked a sea of black glass. No one who had entered the Thorn Keep had ever left. Lyra called her council at dawn. Not the Imperial Council. Those men were her father's creatures, loyal to the Emperor, not to her. She called her own council, the people who had raised her, the people who loved her. There was Alara, her handmaiden, a woman with iron hair and a heart of gold. There was Master Thornwood, the old knight who had taught her to fight. There was Mira, the kitchen girl who had been her secret friend since childhood. There was Kale, the stable boy who had taught her to ride. And there was old Marta, the witch who lived in the forest beyond the walls, the woman who had saved Lyra's life when she was a baby, the woman who knew things that no one else knew. They gathered in the small sitting room behind Lyra's bedchamber, a room that was not on any official map, a room that only Lyra and her most trusted allies knew existed. "I am going to be married," Lyra said, "in 7 days, to the Prince of Thorns." The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of recognition. They had all heard the stories. They had all whispered the name in the dark. They had all hoped, prayed, that the Prince of Thorns was nothing more than a nightmare. "He is real," Lyra said. "The treaty is real. My father signed it yesterday. The messenger is on his way back even now." Marta spoke first. Her voice was dry as autumn leaves, cracked as old stone. "I knew this day would come. I saw it in the bones 20 years ago, when I held you in my arms and cut the cord. I saw a crown of thorns and a river of blood. I did not know if you would be the one wearing the crown or the one bleeding in the river." "Can we stop it?" Alara asked. "Can we fight?" Thornwood shook his head. His old hands trembled on the head of his walking stick. "The Prince of Thorns has conquered 7 kingdoms. His army is said to be made of shadows and steel. We have 10 guards loyal to the princess, perhaps 50 servants who would fight if asked. We do not have an army. We have a kitchen and a stable and an old knight with a bad hip." "Then we run," Kale said. His young face was fierce, angry. "We take the horses tonight. We ride for the coast. We find a ship and we sail to the southern continent, where the prince has no power." "He has power everywhere," Mira whispered. Her voice was small. She was kneading her apron with nervous fingers. They say he can see through the eyes of crows. They say he can hear whispers on the wind. There is nowhere we can hide that he will not find us. Lyra listened. She let them argue, let them plan, let them despair. She had called them here not for answers but for comfort. She needed to see their faces. She needed to remember that she was not alone. When the argument had exhausted itself, she stood up. I am not going to run, she said. And I am not going to fight. The room went silent. What are you going to do? Alara asked. Lyra looked at the parchment, at her father's seal, at the words that had sold her future for 20,000 swords. I am going to meet him, she said, and I am going to look into his eyes, and I am going to ask him, face to face, alone, without armies or walls or lies, why he does what he does. That is suicide, Thornwood said. Perhaps, Lyra said, but it is my suicide, not my father's, not the prince's, mine. Marta laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound, like stones grinding together. She has your spirit, she said to no one in particular. I saw it in the bones 20 years ago. I saw a girl who would face the darkness and demand its name. 7 days passed like 7 years. Lyra did not sleep. She did not eat. She walked the walls of the Crimson Court at all hours, watching the horizon, watching the roads, watching the sky. She trained with Thornwood until her muscles screamed and her hands bled. She sat with Marta in the forest, learning the old words, the old ways, the old secrets. On the 7th day at dawn, the Prince of Thorns arrived. He came not with an army, though his army was camped a day's march away, 20,000 shadows waiting for a signal. He came alone, on a horse as black as ink, wearing armor that seemed to drink the light, with a face hidden behind a helm of beaten iron. The gates opened. The guards bowed. The courtiers whispered. Lyra stood at the top of the steps, in front of the great doors of the Crimson Court, and waited. The prince rode through the gates. He did not look left or right. He did not acknowledge the bowing guards or the whispering courtiers or the servants who scattered from his path like leaves before a storm. He rode directly to the foot of the steps and stopped. For a long moment no one moved. Then the prince dismounted. His movements were slow, deliberate, the movements of a man who had no fear, no hurry, no reason to impress anyone. He climbed the steps, one by one, each footfall a heartbeat, each heartbeat a lifetime. He stopped 3 steps below her. He was taller than she had imagined, broader, darker. The iron helm hid his face, but she could see his eyes through the narrow slits, eyes the color of old blood, watching her with an intensity that made her want to step back. She did not step back. You are the Princess Lyra, he said. His voice was low, rough. It sounded like stones grinding together, like swords scraping against shields. I am, she said. You are to be my wife. I am to be nothing of the sort. Not until I have looked at your face and heard your voice and decided for myself whether you are a husband or a monster. The courtiers gasped. The guards shifted. The prince's hand moved to the hilt of his sword, a blade of black steel, carved with thorns and skulls. But he did not draw it. Instead, he reached up with his other hand and removed his helm. The face beneath the helm was not what she expected. She had expected a monster, a scarred horror, a twisted parody of humanity, a face that would confirm every story she had ever heard. She had prepared herself for that. She had steeled her heart against revulsion, against fear, against the instinct to run. But the face beneath the helm was beautiful. Not handsome in the way of courtiers, soft and pampered and pretty. He was beautiful in the way of a storm, in the way of a wildfire, in the way of a blade held to the throat. His skin was pale, nearly white, stretched tight over high cheekbones and a sharp jaw. His hair was black as ink, long and tangled, falling across his forehead and into his eyes. His lips were thin, bloodless, pressed into a line that might have been a smile or might have been a sneer. And his eyes were gray. Not the gray of morning mist or dove feathers or old stone. The gray of a winter sky just before a blizzard. The gray of ash and bone and the space between heartbeats. Lyra had expected to feel fear. She felt something else, something she could not name. You wanted to see my face, the prince said. Now you have seen it. Are you satisfied? No, Lyra said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. I wanted to see your face, not your skin. I wanted to see the man behind the throne, the man behind the legend, the man who conquered 7 kingdoms and built a crown of thorns. The prince's eyes narrowed. You are bold for a woman who stands alone before a warlord. I am not alone, Lyra said. I have never been alone. I have a handmaiden who would die for me, a knight who taught me to fight, a witch who sees the future, a kitchen girl who makes me laugh, a stable boy who taught me to ride. I have friends. I have family. I have a kingdom that loves me, even if my father does not. She took a step down. Now she was on the same step as him. She was close enough to touch him, close enough to see the tiny scars on his cheek, the way his jaw tightened, the flicker of something, surprise, confusion, in his gray eyes. What do you have? She asked. Not your army, not your fortress, not your crown. What do you have when you are alone in the dark, with no one to see you and no one to hear you? What do you have then? The prince's hand fell away from his sword. His lips parted, closed, parted again. I have my thorns, he said, but his voice was different now, softer, uncertain. Thorns do not keep you warm, Lyra said. Thorns do not hold your hand when you are afraid. Thorns do not laugh at your jokes, or remember your birthday, or sit with you in silence when there are no words left. Why are you saying this? He asked. His voice cracked on the last word. Just a little, just enough for her to hear. Because I want to know, Lyra said. Before I decide whether to marry you or kill you or run from you, I want to know who you really are. Not the Prince of Thorns, not the warlord, not the legend. You, the boy you were before the crown, the man you might become after. The courtiers had retreated. The guards had stepped back. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. The steps of the Crimson Court had become a world of their own, a stage with 2 players and no audience except the wind and the sky. The Prince of Thorns looked at Lyra for a long, silent moment. His gray eyes searched her face, looking for something. A lie, a trap, a trick. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Lyra was not lying. She was not trapping. She was not tricking. She was just standing there, waiting for an answer. My name is not the Prince of Thorns, he said finally. That is a name they gave me, a name I earned, a name I have never deserved and never escaped. What is your real name? He hesitated. For the first time since he had ridden through the gates, he looked uncertain, vulnerable, almost afraid. I do not remember, he whispered. I have been the Prince of Thorns for so long that I have forgotten the boy I was before. I have forgotten my mother's face. I have forgotten the sound of my father's voice. I have forgotten the name they gave me at birth, before the thorns grew and the blood flowed and the crown became my cage. Lyra felt something crack inside her chest. It was not her heart. Her heart was still beating, steady and strong. It was something else, something she had not known was there. A wall, a barrier, a thing she had built to protect herself from feeling too much, caring too deeply, hurting too badly. I know what that is like, she said softly. To forget who you were, to become a name that is not your own, to be a thing that other people need you to be, even if it is not who you are. The prince's eyes widened. You are a princess, the daughter of an emperor. You have everything. You have never wanted for anything. I have wanted for everything that matters, Lyra said. I have wanted a father who sees me as a daughter, not a bargaining chip. I have wanted a mother who did not die when I was born. I have wanted a life that was chosen by me, not for me. I have wanted to be Lyra, not the princess, not the virgin of the Crimson Court, not the prize to be won. Just Lyra. She reached out, slowly, carefully. Her hand moved through the space between them, a space that had been filled with fear and legend and the weight of 7 conquered kingdoms. Her fingers touched his cheek. He flinched, not because he was afraid of being hurt, because he was afraid of being touched, because he had forgotten, in all the years of war and conquest and loneliness, what it felt like to be touched by someone who was not trying to kill him. Who are you? She whispered. Not the Prince of Thorns. The boy. The one you forgot. Who was he? The prince's eyes closed. His breath came in short, ragged gasp. His hands, the hands that had killed kings and shattered armies, hung at his sides, trembling. He was kind, the prince said. His voice was barely audible. He was kind, and he was gentle, and he loved to read stories about heroes who saved people instead of destroying them. He wanted to be a healer. He wanted to grow herbs in a garden and tend to the sick and live in a small cottage by the sea. What happened to him? He died. The prince's voice hardened. His father sold him to a warlord when he was 8 years old. The warlord beat the kindness out of him, burned the gentleness out of him, cut the love out of him with a knife that had no mercy and a lesson that had no end. By the time he was 12, the boy was gone. There was only the thorn, only the blade, only the hunger. Lyra did not pull her hand away. She kept it on his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers, feeling the beat of his pulse, fast and frightened and so human. That boy is not dead, she said. He is hiding, buried beneath the thorns, buried beneath the armor and the legend and the blood. But he is still there. I can see him, in your eyes, in the way you flinch when I touch you, in the way you said he was kind instead of I was kind. You are still in there, aren't you? The boy who wanted to be a healer. The prince opened his eyes. They were wet, not crying. She did not think he knew how to cry anymore, but wet, shining, filled with something that looked like hope and looked like terror and looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump or step back. No one has ever asked me that before, he said. No one has ever looked at me and seen anything except the thorns. I am not no one, Lyra said. I am Lyra, and I am asking you now, not the Prince of Thorns, not the warlord, not the legend, you, the boy who wanted to be a healer. Is he still there? The prince's hand rose, slowly, trembling. His fingers touched her wrist, the hand she had placed on his cheek. His touch was feather-light, tentative, as if he had forgotten how to touch without hurting. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know if he is still there. I don't know if he can ever come back. I have done terrible things, irreparable things, things that cannot be undone or forgiven or forgotten. I have built a crown of thorns from the bones of my enemies. I have conquered kingdoms and crushed rebellions and left rivers of blood in my wake. I am not a good man. I am not even a man anymore. I am a monster wearing a man's skin. Monsters do not worry about being monsters, Lyra said. They do not wonder if they can be healed. They do not remember that they once wanted to be kind. The fact that you are asking these questions, the fact that you are standing here, letting me touch your face, letting me see your tears, that means the boy is still there. That means he is not dead. That means he is fighting to come back. Why do you care? He asked. His voice broke on the question. Why does any of this matter to you? I am your enemy. I am the man your father sold you to. I am the Prince of Thorns. I am everything you should fear and hate and despise. Because, Lyra said, I have spent 19 years being a thing that other people wanted me to be. Princess, a virgin, a bargaining chip, a prize. And I am tired of it. I am tired of being seen as a thing instead of a person. And I look at you, and I see someone else who is tired of being a thing. Someone else who wants to be seen. She stepped closer, close enough that her chest almost touched his armor, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, the quickness of his breath, the hammering of his heart. I see you, she said. Not the Prince of Thorns, not the warlord, not the legend. I see the boy who wanted to be a healer. I see the man who might still become one. And I am not afraid of you. The Prince of Thorns, whose real name he would later remember, was Kalen, did not know what to do. He had prepared for everything. He had prepared for a fight. He had prepared for a flight. He had prepared for tears, for pleas, for bargaining, for betrayal. He had not prepared for this, for a woman who looked at him and saw something other than a monster, for a woman who touched his face and did not flinch, for a woman who spoke to him as if he were still human. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Kalen did something he had not done in 20 years. He cried. Not the silent, shameful leaking of moisture from his eyes, the thing that had happened when Lyra first touched his cheek. He cried. Great, heaving sobs that shook his shoulders and contorted his face and made sounds that he did not recognize as coming from his own throat. He cried for the boy he had been. He cried for the father who had sold him. He cried for the warlord who had broken him. He cried for the 7 kingdoms he had conquered and the thousands he had killed and the person he had become. And Lyra held him. She wrapped her arms around him, around his armor, around his thorns, around all the sharp and dangerous edges of him, and she held him. She did not speak. She did not shush him or tell him it would be okay or make promises she could not keep. She just held him, let him cry, let him fall apart, let him be something other than the Prince of Thorns, if only for a moment. When the crying stopped, Kalen pulled back. His face was red and swollen and streaked with tears. He looked younger, softer, more like the boy he had described and less like the warlord he had become. "What do I do now?" he asked. His voice was raw, broken, honest. "I don't know," Lyra said. "But whatever you do not have to do it alone. My army is camped a day's march away. 20,000 soldiers who have pledged their lives to me. They will not accept a weak king. They will not follow a healer. Then do not bring them. Send them home. Dismiss your army. Break the treaty. Walk away from the throne and the crown and the legend. Walk away from all of it." "Walk away to where?" Lyra smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in 7 days. Felt like sunlight after a storm. "Walk away to a small cottage by the sea," she said, "where you can grow herbs in a garden and tend to the sick and read stories about heroes who save people instead of destroying them. Walk away to the life you wanted before the world broke you." Kalen stared at her. His gray eyes, still wet, still shining, searched her face for the lie, the trap, the trick. He found nothing. "You would come with me?" he asked. "You would leave the Crimson Court? Leave your father? Leave your kingdom?" "I would leave all of it," Lyra said. "I have been a princess for 19 years. I have been a bargaining chip, a prize, a virgin, a daughter, a symbol. I have never been just Lyra. And I think if I am going to be just Lyra anywhere, it would be in a small cottage by the sea with a man who is trying to remember how to be kind." They left that night. Not together, that would have been too dangerous, too obvious, too easily stopped. Kalen rode back to his army and dismissed them. He told them the war was over. He told them the princess had refused him, and he had no heart for conquering without her. He told them to go home, to plant crops, to raise children, to live the lives they had forgotten they wanted. Some of them obeyed. Some of them cursed him. Some of them tried to kill him. But Kalen, even without his armor, without his army, without his crown, was still the deadliest man in the 9 kingdoms. He survived. Lyra waited until the castle slept. Then she packed a small bag, a change of clothes, some bread and cheese, the map that Marta had given her, and the dagger that had never left her side. She left a letter for her father. It was short. "Father, you sold me for an army. I am not a thing to be sold. I am a person, and I am going to live my own life in my own way with my own chosen family. Do not look for me. I will not be found. Your daughter, not your property. Lyra." She met Kalen at the edge of the forest, where Marta was waiting with 2 horses and a knowing smile. "I saw this in the bones," Marta said. 20 years ago, I saw a girl who would face the darkness and demand its name. I saw a boy who would remember his own. I saw a cottage by the sea and a garden full of herbs and 2 people who would learn, together, what it meant to be human. Will we be happy? Lyra asked. Marta shrugged. The bones do not tell happiness. The bones tell truth. And the truth is, happiness is not something you find. It is something you build, together, with your hands and your hearts and your willingness to keep trying, even when it is hard. Lyra hugged her. Then she mounted her horse, and Kalen mounted his, and together they rode into the darkness. Epilogue: The Cottage by the Sea. 3 years later, a small cottage stood on a cliff overlooking a sea of blue water and white foam. A garden grew in the front, not of flowers, though there were some of those, but of herbs, rosemary and thyme, lavender and sage, mint and chamomile, and a dozen other plants that smelled of earth and healing and peace. Inside the cottage, a man with gray eyes and a scarred face sat by the fire, reading a story to a small child. The story was about a hero who saved people instead of destroying them. The man read slowly, carefully, sounding out the words as if he were learning them for the first time. In the kitchen, a woman with copper hair and a gentle smile was grinding herbs into a poultice. A knock came at the door. A traveler from the nearby village, a farmer's wife with a sick child, a fisherman with a cut that would not stop bleeding, an old man with pain in his bones. The woman set down her mortar and pestle. She wiped her hands on her apron. She opened the door. "Welcome," she said. "How can we help?" The traveler stepped inside. They always looked around, at the herbs hanging from the ceiling, at the fire burning in the hearth, at the man reading to the child, at the woman with the gentle smile. They always looked surprised. This was not what they had expected from the cottage by the sea. This was not what they had expected from the woman who had once been a princess or the man who had once been a warlord. But they always sat down. They always accepted the tea. They always let the woman tend their wounds and the man speak soft words of comfort. And they always left feeling lighter than when they had arrived. One evening, after the last traveler had gone, Lyra sat on the cliff overlooking the sea. Kaelin sat beside her, their shoulders touching, their hands intertwined. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Leaving the throne? The army? The crown?" Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. The wind whipped his hair across his face. The sea crashed against the rocks below. "No," he said finally. "I regret the things I did before I left, the kingdoms I conquered, the people I killed, the person I became. But I do not regret leaving. I do not regret this." He squeezed her hand. "I regret nothing that brought me here. To you. To this. To the boy I am finally remembering how to be." Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder. The sun was setting over the sea, a blaze of orange and pink and gold, the kind of sunset that made you believe in beauty, in hope, in second chances. "We should plant more rosemary tomorrow," she said. "Why rosemary?" "Because it is for remembrance, and we have so much to remember. The boy who wanted to be a healer, the girl who refused to be a prize, the cottage by the sea, the life we built together." Kaelin kissed the top of her head. "We should plant a whole garden of rosemary," he said. And they did.